lot of people say, oh, the scientists may not know what they're talking about. Well, unfortunately, they do. And the predictions they've made in the past have more than come true. In fact, they've been conservative and have underestimated a lot of these damages. So when we look at this kind of projected future, we see that the cost of carbon is still going up, and we've got to take action to put a price on carbon.
Is an inconvenient truth really an inconvenient goof? Well, my next guest seems to think so. Tom Harris, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition in Ottawa, has some profound problems with Al Gore's supposed science. Welcome aboard, Tom. What are your three main concerns right off the hopper in terms of what Al Gore is saying these days?
Well, he's backwards in three really basic areas. For example, his science is backwards. He says that rising CO2 is going to cause rising temperature. Well, we've seen for the last 17 years that hasn't happened. CO2 has risen 8%. Temperature has stayed about the same. In fact, if you look through the geologic record, Gore is exactly backwards again in the science case. For example, he's saying, as I said, CO2 rises, temperature rises. That's not in the historical record. We see CO2 rise first and temperature follow. The second thing that he's backwards on, and this is really critical for developing countries, is he says that we should spend so much effort and so much time that he said nothing about adaptation in his 24 hours of reality. It was all focused on stopping climate change, okay, which of course we can't do. And yet across the world, people are suffering due to natural climate change. Yet of the $359 billion a year that's now being spent on the climate issue, $1 billion a year, only 6% of it is going to help real people today. The rest of it is all focused on what might happen decades in the future. So that's backwards. And his third thing that he's backwards on is on the energy, okay? Let's say you're an ocean captain piloting a ship and you see a massive hurricane coming. The last thing you're going to do is tell your crew to abandon the safety of a big ship and get into lifeboats. I mean, that would be crazy. Yet that's what Al Gore's doing on the energy issue. He tells us we have these climate catastrophe coming and we should move to the weakest and least reliable energy sources, things like wind power. What we really need is more coal, which is about 40% of America's electricity, and other solid, dependable energy sources to, you know, basically survive whatever nature throws at us next. So he's backwards on all three counts.
It's amazing, Tom, and yet he seems to have so many acolytes. I mean, I'm going to play a clip here of a high school teacher, someone influencing young minds, who basically says, when you analyze his words, what does the science have to do with it? Let's check out this clip that's gone viral on YouTube.
However you construct this, the argument still leads to the same inescapable conclusion, which is this: when faced with uncertainty about our future, the only responsible choice, the only defensible choice, really the only choice, is column A, in order to eliminate this as a possibility. Because the risk of not acting far outweighs the risk of acting. So, there's my silver bullet argument.
Was that fellow wearing a Batman t-shirt, Tom? I can't tell, but what's the response to that theory?
Well, the problem is, of course, risk is composed of two things. It's outcome, which in the case of catastrophic climate change would be catastrophic by definition, and it's also likelihood, okay? If we were only worried about the possible outcome, we'd be building asteroid defense systems because, of course, if a civilization-destroying asteroid were to hit the Earth, that would be catastrophic. But the likelihood is so low that you aren't doing that, okay? If we did see something coming, that would be another issue. But the bottom line is that, yes, if the science was saying what he says it says, namely that we were almost certainly headed for crisis and catastrophe, then yeah, his argument makes sense. But the likelihood is just so slim. And you know, you point out that he's a high school teacher. There's a real problem there. Al Gore, for example, on the day that he did the 24 Hours of Reality, he was talking to 1,000 high school students in San Pedro, California, and he said that the climate crisis, and of course the drive to reduce our use of fossil fuels, was the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. And he went on to say, and listen to this, if you set your minds to it, students, there's absolutely nothing you can't do. Well, I used
Wow.
to think, when I was 16, I thought that too. But you simply cannot replace our dependable coal, oil, natural gas, hydro, and nuclear. You cannot replace them with flimsy sources like wind power and solar, no matter how many billions you pump in from the government, because they simply are intermittent and diffuse. They don't give enough power to run an industrial society. So yes, students, there are things you can't do, and that's one of them.
And, you know, Tom, we're running out of time, but very quickly, what do you make of the double standard, too, when it comes to Al Gore? I mean, here is someone who I understand is lecturing all of us to reduce our carbon footprint, and yet his carbon footprint is several times greater than the average American in 10 seconds or less. What's your take on that?
Well, he should follow Gandhi if he really believes what he says. Gandhi said, live simply so others simply may live. We'd like to see Al Gore do that, too. If we all as a society should do it, show us how to do it, Mr. Gore.
Wow. Well, I'm afraid following Gandhi would mean he'd have to give up his corporate jet, so I guess that's off the books. Thank you so much, Tom. A pleasure as always.
Righto.